You're listening to the OCD Stories podcast, hosted by me, Stuart Ralph. The OCD Stories is a podcast dedicated to raising awareness and understanding around obsessive-compulsive symptoms. I do this through interviewing inspired therapists, psychologists, and people who have experienced OCD. Welcome to the OCD Stories. And welcome to episode 481 of the podcast. And in this one, I chat with Zoey, who has kindly agreed to come on and share her OCD story with us. And in particular, we discuss fears of choking and swallowing, obsessing over a partner's porn use, therapy, exposure and response prevention therapy, aligning therapy with her values, body dysmorphic disorder, seeing her therapist through NOCD, and much more. Struggling with OCD? You're not alone. NOCD offers live, face-to-face video therapy with licensed specialists who truly understand OCD. NOCD therapists are trained in exposure and response prevention therapy, the gold standard for OCD treatment, and provide personalized treatment and support for children and adults. Take the first step towards regaining your life today. Visit nocd.com, or the link will be in the episode description to book a free call. So thank you to you guys for listening. I hope you're well. And thank you to Zoe for her time and story. I appreciate it. And without further ado, here she is. Welcome to the podcast, Zoe.
Hello.
It's good to have you
Thanks
here.
for having me.
No worries. So I'd love to hear your OCD story, so you can share that in as little as much detail as you want to give.
Okay. I like to say I've had OCD my whole life, but I don't think I really recognized that I had OCD until I was 18. I guess it started with different medical fears when I was really young, and that adapted into a couple years later, after some dormancy, issues swallowing and like this really bad fear of choking. But it only was something I was afraid of in like two domains, and that was eating specific foods and going to the dentist. And that persisted for a while. I was able to end up going back to the dentist, but there's still specific things that I can't handle, like having things in the back of my throat, or like oranges or steak, just like really weird. And I can't swallow pills that well. But I wouldn't say it's like OCD at this point. It's like reminiscent of the OCD I had. Just these little things that have stuck with me. After that, I can't say I really had it. I can't say that I remember having it in middle school or high school, or like symptoms of it. I've always been a really anxious person generally, but it was never OCD until the most recent one. I like to think of it as like operant conditioning almost, or like a classical conditioning situation. But I was in my first relationship, and my partner, and I don't know if this is vulgar or not, but he was having a hard time staying hard.
Okay.
And I thought it was me. And I was like, what's wrong? What's wrong? Like, am I doing something wrong? He was like, no, like, you're not doing anything, I swear. So I was like, oh, okay. And then it happened again. And then I kept asking. And then, of course, like, no explanation. Oh, Zoe, it's not you, I swear. Like, there's nothing wrong. That wasn't working. And so, like, he's got to find something to blame. And he's like, well, I mean, I watched porn on Sunday, so maybe that could have something to do with it. And it was like never something that I thought about too hard before then. But then after he made that connection, it was like, oh, this can be something that's like threatening to me. And at first it was just like a little bit of discomfort. I was like thinking about this thing that I'd never really thought about like that before, where, oh, okay, I guess that's fine. I don't really feel fine about that, but whatever. And then I started obsessively Googling. Like, I remember, like, I would Google for like an hour and then like send him a text like, hey, I saw this thing on the internet, da 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 da. And he'd be like, oh, okay, cool. Thanks for sharing. Like, I'm really glad that you feel comfortable talking about things that you're uncomfortable about in our relationship. I was like, all right, but it didn't change anything. And so it just like spiraled to this rabbit hole where it wasn't just me Googling things anymore. Like, I just developed more and more compulsions around it, like going through his social media, going through his devices, going through his laundry. Oh gosh, what else? I did some weird things. I feel like those are the worst. I can't quite remember. It was a long period though. I'd say 2 years of this. I'm not okay with this. I need you to stop doing this. Back and forth. And then I realized I realized it wasn't normal for me to be doing the behaviors I was doing, and that those were causing me a lot of distress, but I didn't quite know what to do about it because it's kind of like it's weird content, it's weird theme where there's resources like at that point I started listening to this podcast and I was like kind of getting connected with a therapist through NOCD, and I was trying to find OCD specific resources. This is after like 2 years or like a year and a half. And it was helpful because, oh, okay, I can see that this isn't just me being a crazy girlfriend. It is probably OCD. It's probably ROCD, but it doesn't quite fit I never found that it fit. It's like not an obsession with something wrong with the partner, and it's not really something. It felt weird. It was me being not okay with an action that another person was doing. I guess that does kind of fit that, but it didn't feel like it quite fit. And I couldn't find that many people who had similar experience. So it was really hard for me to think like, is this actually OCD or am I just being fucking weird? I don't know if I can say that, but
yeah, you can. Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But started a therapy for it, and that was really helpful. I can't say I stuck to the ERP too closely, but I will say, I mean, I didn't intentionally expose myself to a trigger, but I did stop doing the compulsions. And I'd say that was the most helpful part of ERP, kind of getting out of that habit of doing the behavior that wasn't helpful. So I'd say my therapist has been telling me I'm like good, but I don't know.
Yeah, so you're right. The stopping the compulsions is the most important part of ERP. The only reason we do the exposure is to give ourselves an opportunity to respond differently, which is not do the compulsions. So yeah, I'm glad that approach helped you. And at what point? Because you were saying there, you felt, is this OCD? Isn't this OCD? And then obviously, but you're working with your OCD therapist on it. At what point, if you are there at all, where you felt like, okay, I can see that this is OCD?
I think it was noting how my behavior was different from the average person who doesn't like pornography in their relationship. I I know I'm not alone in going through people's phones or going through people's laundry, whatever. But the feeling that it wasn't going to be okay if I didn't do that, like I had to know. I had to know because if I knew, then I could change what I was doing to protect myself. Like let's assume one of those things shows me, okay, he's still watching porn. Then I can stay later the next day and make sure he doesn't have the opportunity to do so. Or I can engage in activity with him that makes him less likely to want to watch it. And I don't think that other people are controlling their lives to such a degree in that way, or like really like, I guess it's like the compulsivity of it, just the having to do it aspect that differentiated it for me.
Yeah, and what you know, when he mentioned it the first time, prior to that, I think you said you hadn't thought much about it. So what say are or were your views on porn aside from the OCD side of it?
Before it, I didn't think about it. It was one of those things. I mean, I was like a fresh college freshman, so I was young. It was my first relationship, so it's not one of those things you have to quite think about yet.
True.
I didn't have to. It was just, that's what boys do, and you don't really think about it. And you might talk about it briefly, but you just assume that they're doing it and it's not a problem. But I know growing up, my mom was super against it, but not in a way where she'd talk about it all the time. But with her most recent partner, he's not a great guy, but she'd mention, so I found this stuff on his computer. He's looking at, XYZ. She's like, I just don't get it. It's just kind of disgusting. Or, I just don't get like why he wants to watch this stuff. It makes me feel like, and of course, it seems like a pretty obvious through line. My mom having problems and sharing it with me inappropriately, and then me having problems and going through his stuff just like my mom did too. Yeah, but aside from that, it was like, okay, yeah, mom, I get it, especially considering she's like 60 and her partner's looking at like 20-year-olds. I'd probably feel a little ripped if I was in the same situation. But before, it was never like this problem. Now I would say, despite, I know this is like, maybe I shouldn't hold this belief because it aligns with OCD, but I'm like okay with the fact that I'm not okay with it.
Yeah.
And that's just one of my boundaries. And maybe that is still reinforcing the OCD, like subliminally. I know my therapist would love me to not have that belief. I don't know if she'd actually tell me that. But yeah, no, I don't know. I'm not okay with it, but I know that people don't have to be okay with it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Exactly that. You decide what your personal beliefs and values are, and if you feel that clashes with that, that's okay. It's just unfortunate that OCD also attaches onto that, but that's where, okay, my belief is I don't like porn or don't think my partner should be using it, and that's perfectly okay. And then from an OCD point of view, it's just, I just got to not do the compulsions. Rather than, being okay with porn because actually it means I'm leaning into the OCD. But that doesn't have to be the way. Yeah.
It doesn't work. At least if it doesn't align with your beliefs, I think it's really hard to make yourself be okay with something if you're not actually okay with it. And I think that was half of the struggle with OCD after stopping the compulsions. But
yeah. Okay, fair enough. So, have there been any other sort of themes that have come up for you over the years?
Of course, there's the choking and swallowing thing.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that could be related to OCD until pretty recently. Like, I was listening to an episode of your podcast, and some a guest of yours was discussing that is apparently related. But I've never put like an OCD label on it.
Mm.
Recently, it's actually been coming back in like not the greatest way. It's been getting worse. It was like really bad when I was in elementary school,
Mm.
and then it kind of went away, and now it's back. But like I used to be able to swallow pills kind of okay a month ago, and now I'm like quartering tiny little and still struggling with that. So I don't really know what's up with that. Um,
Well, it's not out yet, but I recorded an episode this week with a lady who, same fear, terrified of choking, has been since she was very, very young. So yeah, it's more common than you think. The fact that I've had 2 people in a week share that, it shows you it's not too rare.
Yeah.
For you, I can't remember whether you said this or not. Was there any like trigger event where you did choke or anything like that?
Oh no, it was so stupid. I just the day it started mattering, we were finishing with recess and they like stand you up in these lines before going inside. And I remember standing in my line and I just couldn't swallow. And I was so perturbed by it. It's such a weird feeling. It's just saliva, but I was just, oh, I can't swallow. I don't know why I can't swallow. And then, yeah, it just kind of did its thing from there.
Yeah, maybe you got a bit panicky in that moment, and then it was really scary, and then it just spirals from there. Yeah. Yeah, and I just like to ask that when it comes to a fear of choking, because sometimes people do have they choked as a kid, and obviously that would be traumatic potentially, and then no wonder their brain is now going, worried about eating or drinking or whatever. But yeah, you and like this other lady I mentioned, there was nothing. There was no like choking incident or anything like that, which obviously is another somewhat hallmark of OCD when it's latching on to something that hasn't happened. Obviously, it can be OCD too if you have choked historically, but we might call it more trauma-induced OCD at that point. Yeah. Okay. So, and I'm only asking this question because it relates to the choking. Do you take medication for OCD?
I did for a period. I didn't find it initially, it was helpful, and then it was between okay, it's not as helpful. I have to increase the dose or not. And I didn't want to increase the dose, so I stopped.
Yeah.
Now I don't have to take medication for it, but
yeah, fair enough. And I was just asking that purely on the basis of the pills and whether because you have to take that medication daily. So it was, what's that like? And yeah, okay. So are you in a relationship at the minute?
Yeah, same partner.
Oh, same partner. Oh, sorry. Okay. Yeah. So is the what am I trying to say? How is it now around the porn stuff? Have you made your boundary clear of I don't like that in the relationship, or is compulsions coming up, that sort of thing?
I've made the boundary clear. There was a long time when it wasn't, but it came to this point this past summer where it was okay. Actually, I'm pretty. I know I'm not okay with this, and a boundary is that if you want to be in a relationship with me, you've got to respect it. Otherwise, I'm not okay with it anymore. It just feels disrespectful to not respect someone's boundary. That's been okay. Of course, it's one of those things where someone can agree to it as he has in the past, and then if they're good enough at hiding it, you can never find out if they're not actually following what you've said. And so I'd say that's the only thing where sometimes I just get this like gut feeling. It's like, okay, you've got to ask. You just got to ask. Okay, are you still are we still are you still following? And maybe that's not great. I try not to do it very often. And the frequency with which I've asked it has declined. But But if he's ever acting like off, let's say like he like moves his phone in a weird way, or like I don't know, sometimes I'm, hey, why'd you do that? Is there something you don't want me to see? And then typically it's that no. But it's been, I want to say like 4 or 5 months.
Okay.
That's been nice.
Yeah. Okay, good. Is that 4 or 5 months since you started the therapy and working on it, or yeah?
No, it's been almost a year since I've started therapy. 4 or 5 months since I done.
Yeah.
Put the boundary.
The boundary. Yeah. Okay. And earlier you said, what did you say? When you first started talking about the initial incident with porn, and you said, I was fine with it, and then it suddenly realized, this is something that could harm me or hurt me. And then it makes sense what you were saying earlier about the through line with your mum, of your mum's talking to you, telling you how this is hurting her. So it makes sense from like an anxious OCD part of our brain that then latches onto that information of, well, mum's hurt by this. This is probably a threat to me also. And then we worry and obsess about it.
Yeah, it doesn't help, I think. I don't know. The internet is really affirming of it too, because it's not just my mom. And I think that makes it hard when it's not, there was this word, or there's this term where a person doesn't realize, God, I wish I could remember it more technically. But they're not quite aware that the OCD is irrational.
Okay.
And that's like this,
or low insight.
Low insight. Thank you. I think that's what I'm trying to
that's how I would
describe
it. Yeah. They don't see that it's OCD. They believe it.
Yeah. I would say for a while that made this difficult because, well, just about everything on the internet agrees with me. There's studies that agree with me. And sure, there's also studies that don't, but I believe the ones that show brain changes. I would believe that. I believe the ones that discuss addictive behavior and how that affects your interactions with other people. And that kind of makes sense. And so having all that input made it really difficult to separate something that you can feel from OCD.
Yeah.
But
yeah, and I think obviously when this all happened initially, you're 18, I believe, first year of college. You're also still very in that sort of age range where you're figuring out your identity, your beliefs, your values, what you stand for, all of that, and this happening may have brought that to the forefront of your mind and said, you have to figure this out now. You have to wrestle with this idea and figure out what you stand for. Which if you're prone to sort of OCD and overthinking can then just become very problematic.
Yeah, definitely.
And with the swallowing, choking, all of that stuff, were you working on that with your therapist, or had that subsided enough that you didn't need to work on it at the minute?
I've never worked on it directly with a therapist. Well, I had 2 sessions when I was in 2nd grade when it was a problem. And the first time my mom brought me in because, well, she hasn't really been able to eat for 2 months. She's lost a lot of weight. We don't really know what's going on. And then a month later in our office eating just fine. So it was, okay, that was weird. Don't know how to explain that. And it's persisted, but it was never enough of an issue to go in. And I've always mentioned it. Oh yeah, by the way, but it's one of those things. It might just not seem as pertinent, or maybe it's just one of those facts of life. So I present it as not being that much of a problem. I don't know.
Yeah, fair enough. So let me think. Is there anything else you want to say on your story that you haven't shared that you want to?
Hmm. I guess recently I'm wrestling with the relationship between body dysmorphia and OCD.
Okay.
And this is like three very separate,
Hmm.
great story aspects of OCD, I guess. I don't know if the choking and the body dysmorphia can really be clumped in as OCD. Apparently there's through lines.
Mhm.
Um, but that's really all I can think of, honestly.
Yeah. Did you want to speak about the body dysmorphia or BDD, or did you want to leave it? It's entirely up to you. Because for me, it's very similar. It's part of the family, basically.
Hmm.
When I had BDD, experiences of BDD, because it never got diagnosed because it's when I was younger, for me, it felt exactly the same as OCD. The only difference was my insight was way lower. I believed what I thought I was seeing in the mirror versus what actually was there. So I had way less insight than I did with OCD, where I always knew this is OCD, but what if? And I couldn't help it, you know. So
Yeah, that's a good point, honestly. I've never tried to think of it through the OCD lens,
mm,
but now that I do, I definitely think there were some aspects of it that could think of as OCD. We could talk about it.
yeah, it's up to you. Yeah, if you wanna share, go for it.
Okay. Um, I don't know. I like to say I've tried both sides of it.
Mm,
Is maybe a really crude way to put I've lost a lot of weight through my behaviors and I've also gained a lot of weight.
mm,
Um, which is interesting to me to see the difference between those two manifestations of it. But I just know I've never been satisfied with my body. And I also know that I don't know what it looks like at all.
mm,
And I know that throughout each of the less eating phases and more eating phases, I've had incredibly regimented food routines. Like I eat at the same time every day.
mm.
Um, and I tend to eat about the same thing. And there's certain things that I can't eat, and there's certain things that I can. And they all have to wrap around when I exercise.
Mm.
And um, yeah, that's kind of been a constant. I know
Mm.
that like body checking is something I've done, and maybe that's not necessary, but it's definitely like a get in the bathroom, see how you look type
Mm.
thing, which might be a little bit, or maybe reinforcing it. Um, yeah, that's about all I can think of for it.
Mm. And how long has those worries been going on for around weight?
Oh, I'd honestly say since I was like 10.
Mm.
Yeah. I don't think I've ever known a time when it wasn't a concern. Just a little bit sad to think about.
Mm.
Yeah, it's always been a thing. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's tough. Is that something you brought up with your therapist?
Oh, I've told every single one I've had.
Okay.
But because I'm a healthy weight and I eat 3 meals, it's not
Yeah, yeah. I was thinking more from
really a
the
problem.
yeah, just the more the maybe how you view yourself, and I guess if there are compulsions or rigidity, that is something that can be if we look at it from an OCD lens, it's something that can be targeted. Um,
Yeah. I have brought that up to my most recent therapist, the like specifics of the eating schedule and the exercise schedule that complements the eating schedule. And yeah, she recommends that I break the schedule.
mhm,
Um, I think for her, it's been difficult to tell me to not exercise as much or to not eat as healthy, because then she's like telling me to do something that maybe necessarily is counterintuitive and might not seem good to recommend. So I think she recognizes it's not a healthy amount of control, but
it can be a tough one, anything around eating. But it depends obviously how strict you've been. If it's like you don't eat sugar at all, then it might be, well, once a week have a chocolate bar, like, because if that's going to trigger you, it's not actually going to make that much of a difference physiologically, but mentally it will be an exposure. Okay, so and your therapist, did you say you're seeing them through NOCD?
I am.
Okay, and how's that whole process been with NOCD?
It's been really helpful. I'd say I had a couple therapists before, one in person, but wasn't an OCD specialist, and then one through another online one, which maybe I shouldn't. I don't know if they're like competitors or something. But because neither of them are OCD specialists, it was I tell them what I was feeling about porn, and then it just wasn't helpful.
Yeah, they analyze it too much.
Yeah, they analyze it or almost like give in to the compulsions. Like, oh, you shouldn't be okay with that. And then don't actually address maybe you shouldn't do that behavior though. But yeah, NoCD was super helpful. It took a handful of months to get connected with the therapist, but I'd say that was the most important thing in recovery. Definitely.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So, words of hope for anyone listening. What would you tell them?
When people say that content doesn't care or doesn't matter, theme doesn't matter, I used to think that was stupid. But if you follow the ERP, regardless of what the theme or content of your OCD is, I genuinely think it can get better. If you just stop compulsions and work hard, I genuinely think it can get better.
Yeah, I agree. And then you could pick up the phone and call 18-year-old you. What do you tell her?
I tell her to trust herself a bit more, but to not be like mom. That's like really good advice. I would always, no, if I'm being no, but to say, stop doing these terrible things is not as motivating.
No, fair enough. And then you got a billboard. What do you want written on that billboard?
Oh, geez. One that people see every day?
Yeah. Be anything.
Oh, this is silly. Live, laugh, love. I think it's very silly.
Yeah. Live, laugh, love, yeah?
With some cringy things to go along with it.
Like some flowers.
Yes. Like so awfully cringy that it seems like it's meant to be that way, but it's like totally a joke.
Okay. Nice. I like it. And yeah, lastly, anything else you wish you could have said or shared, Zoey?
This is maybe a long-winded last remark, but if OCD is making you do something with like your physical body in relation to other people, that can be a difficult thing, but to be forgiving of it because it's not like you know any better. So
Yeah, I think that's important. I think a lot of people have shame for compulsions they may have done in the past, but they weren't choosing to do that. It was, they were driven by the OCD. So yeah, I think, compassion for that is important. Cool. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. It's been awesome to hear it and to meet you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to this week's podcast. And thank you to our Patreons who helped make this episode possible. And if you would like to find out more about Patreon and the rewards and benefits, then there will be a link in the episode description. If you enjoy the OCD Stories podcast and would like to support us, please subscribe and rate the show wherever you listen to the podcast. And thank you to NOCD for supporting our work. If you want to find out more about NOCD, you can click the link in the episode description. And quick disclaimer, guys, this podcast is not therapy. It is not a replacement for therapy. Please seek treatment from a trained professional. And until we speak, take care.